Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you are having a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you happen to be watching this. And for today's video, I thought I would do something a little bit different, and I thought I would actually sit down and talk to you guys about how I structure my training as a wellness competitor or as a wellness athlete. I think this video might be helpful for anybody who maybe is interested in competing in the wellness division and you want a bit of an insight into how I have trained, how I have made the progress that I've made over the last year or two. And I think it will still be helpful even if you're not doing wellness, maybe you're doing a different class, or maybe you're not competing at all, and maybe you just want to know how you should structure your own training program in order to make sure that you are progressing in the way that you want. I know the wellness look is super popular these days. Lots of girls want a big lower body. So this might give you a bit of an idea as to how you could go about that. So before we do get stuck into the video, of course, as always, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, give it a comment, tell me if you find this useful, and if you guys want to see more of these sort of sit down style videos, and I will of course do as you wish. And yeah, let's just get straight into it. So the first thing that I want to make very clear with my training program is that this is my training program. This is what has worked for me, for my body. This is based on what I needed relative to my class criteria and my strengths and my weaknesses. This is based on what I can recover from. This is based on the exercises that I enjoy and that suit my mechanics and that I can progress, and it's all tailored to me, right? So while yes, I'm going to go through my workouts and kind of outline how they look for you, don't just take what I'm doing and copying it. This is a program that has been refined over the last 10 months now in order to be the best program for me at this current time. And that's really important. Your needs as an individual or as an athlete, they will change at different points. They will change depending on the phase that you're in, whether that's in an off-season setting or in a dieting phase. They will change based on your life circumstances. Is your stress high? How's your recovery being impacted? They'll be based on things like your injuries and just generally how your body is responding to a program. And so it should be something that, while I say you should keep your program the same, and I do believe that, I don't think you should be changing your program all that often. You might have to tinker with certain aspects of the programming in order to ensure continued progress, right? So you might need to bring the volume down, bring the volume up, swap an exercise and things like that over time, and to just be constantly refining it so it always is suiting you. And ultimately, so that you can always be progressing it, right? That is number one. You need to make sure the program you're doing is sustainable and that you can progress it without getting injured, without burning out, without getting too fatigued. That is what is going to lead to muscle growth. So just to quickly explain why my program is set up the way that it has been set up. So what I'm going to do is just add some pictures of me at the back end of my last diet phase. So we wrapped this up at, I think it was like the 1st of May, 2024. So I had been dieting for about 15, 16 weeks at this point. I finished up with a photo shoot prep. We knew that this was essentially going to be my pre-prep diet and that I would be going into my last building phase ahead of my prep, which I am now in. And so whenever you are thinking about setting up your programming, especially if you are a competitor, what you need to do is a little bit of a needs analysis. So this is essentially looking at your physique and picking out what are the weak points, what are the strong points, and what do you need as an individual compared to what is needed to bring a competitive physique. So if we look at my physique at the back end of that dieting phase, we can see that my areas that are kind of my strengths are my quads. So I have pretty strong quads, but the areas that really needed to come up were my glutes, my hamstrings, and my adductors. My upper body is actually quite developed. I was a figure athlete beforehand. For anybody who doesn't know, I competed naturally as a figure competitor back in 2022. And so off the back of that, I had a pretty decent level, or I have a decent level of muscle mass on my upper body, especially my back. And so that's an area that doesn't really need too much work relative to things like my glutes, which, listen, when we're talking about wellness, I mean, you can have too much glutes, but it's really hard to get to the point where you have too much glutes, especially if you are, like me, a white girl, right? I'm not Brazilian. I'm not one of these fucking Latina Hispanic freaks who was just born with giant glutes, right? I have to work really hard for my glutes to grow. And so that was really what had to be the focus point when we were making this next training program, and just figuring out what exercise I could do. And, you know, like if I look at my pictures now from my last diet to now, especially looking at my glutes, my hamstrings, my adductors, they have come up a lot, right? And it's something that I'm really proud of. And that just says to me that this program worked for me, right? But that is really important. You know, let's say you're a bikini girl, you might look at your physique and say, okay, well, my quads are actually quite strong and I could actually do with bringing them down, which means I'm going to have to really be specific with just glute training. Or maybe you need more delts, maybe you need more lats to give you more of a taper at the waist. Everything should always be specific to you. And if you're not sure about what you need versus the criteria, this is where having a coach who understands the criteria of the division that you're training in is really important, right? Like they should be able to do this for you, right? I have a lot of bikini girls on my team, and you know, quite a lot of them, like there's zero direct quad work, there's shit tons of delts, they've got a good bit of abs, there's obviously lots of glutes. So it's always going to be specific to you and what you need. And again, if you're not a competitor, okay, maybe you want bigger quads, maybe you want bigger glutes, maybe you want bigger delts. You might not have to be as intricate with it, but you can still figure out what those focus areas need to be, and then you can design your training program based around that. So like I said, based off my needs analysis, what I needed: glutes, more glutes, and more glutes, more hamstrings and adductors to just give balance to my legs. So with wellness, the lower body has to be dominant, but there should be no dominant part of the lower body. So what I mean by that is the lower body should be bigger than the upper body, but the glutes and the quads and the hamstrings should all match. You shouldn't just have giant quads or giant glutes. You need to have everything all seamlessly the same amount of dominance, if that makes sense. And so, like I said, for me, you can see like my quads were quite dominant, but I needed a lot more on the posterior chain. And when it comes to upper body, it's really just a bit of delts. I like upper back, arms, like no, I don't need any of that. If anything, I need less upper back traps. If I could get my traps to come down, I would. Sadly, I've never done a trap exercise in my fucking life, and I still have these giant traps, so that just is what it is. Obviously a lot of that's going to come down to exercise execution. So what should you take into account when it comes to designing your training program for yourself? So first thing is going to be needs, like I just said there, like what does your physique need? What areas do you need to focus on? The next thing you need to look at is volume. So volume is the total number of hard working sets that you do per week. Now I could talk about volume for hours, I could talk about everything in this for hours. I don't want to make this video super long, but for most people, for a body part to grow, you probably want to be sitting anywhere between 10 to 20 hard working sets per week. So for me, those are sets that are taken within 2 to 3 reps of failure all the way up to failure. We don't count warm-up sets in there. They're the sets that are really going to drive that stimulus. We know that it's the reps closer to failure that drive more stimulus for muscle growth. And now everybody's volume landmarks, or what they can tolerate, is going to be different. Generally, females can recover from more volume because we have more estrogen. Generally, if you have a greater training age and a better ability to take your sets close to failure, you will need less volume because you're getting more stimulus from those sets, right? You know, if you take someone who does 10 sets a week and all those sets are to complete failure, well, someone who's doing sets to within 3 reps drive failure, in order to get the same amount of stimulus and effective reps, they might need 15 sets. So the better you are able to take your sets close to failure, the less of those total of sets that you will need. Your recoverability and the amount of volume that you can do is also going to depend on your training age, on the muscle group itself. You know, things like delts can recover from a lot. I find the glutes can recover from a lot. My quads can't recover from loads. My hamstrings can't recover from loads. So you have to figure out what volume your body parts and your different muscle groups can recover from. And the only way to figure this out is with trial and error. Trial and error, right? You pick your program, set your volume, see, are you recovering well? Try out a set. Do you stop recovering? Do you stop progressing? Bring the sets back down. And again, that volume load is going to change over time based on what state you are in. When I'm in an off season and I'm super fresh, I can recover from more. If I'm taking PEDs that aid with muscle growth, I can do more volume. In a deficit, for example, now in prep, we have to bring my volume down because I can no longer recover from quite as much. So that volume scale that you are sitting at, it's going to change, right? And this is just something that you learn over time as you learn your own body. The next thing you want to think about is frequency. And this is how many times per week are you training a specific body part. Now, the frequency you're doing is going to be impacted by the volume that you're doing. If you have 20 sets you want to do for a muscle group, instead of doing that in one session, where by the end of that session, those sets are not going to be as high quality, spread it over a week. So you could do it over 2 sessions, you could do it over 3. I train legs 4 days a week at the moment. Now, I will say it's not 4 full leg days. It's 2 glutes and hamstrings day, 1 glute and quad day, and 1 quad day. But I'm still hitting all of those muscle groups minimum twice per week. But when we think about how different exercises are going to, recruit muscle groups, even if they're secondarily, I'm probably hitting most of those muscles at least 3 to 4 times a week, right? It's very hard to just train your glutes without also training your hamstring, say in a hinge, or, your quad a little bit in a split squat. It's always going to be impacted, but that frequency, because I knew my volume for my focused body parts had to be higher, my frequency also had to be higher as well. Something I didn't say about volume there is, if you drive the volume up in one muscle group, you're probably going to have to drive it down in another. Again, my needs. I need more glutes. I don't need more upper body. I do very little volume on my upper body, so I can get away with doing more volume for my lower body as well. So you always need to be thinking about that. You can't just train super high volume for everything. You will probably get an injury. But frequency is going to matter then as well. So you take your volume and you spread it across the week. That's your frequency. The next thing you want to look at then is exercise selection. So what exercises are you going to pick? So exercise selection should be dictated by the muscle group you're training and its functions and movement patterns. So for example, the glutes, you're going to train them through a squat variation, which is hip flexion. You're going to train them through a hinge variation, which is hip extension. You're going to train them through a thrust variation, which is again hip extension, and then an abduction variation, which is hip abduction. So that's the main function of the glutes. We are taking those functions and we are training them through different movement patterns. And again, there's a lot more that goes into exercise selection. There's things like resistance profiles, strength profiles, the equipment that you have available. Is it compound lifts? Is it isolations? Again, I don't want to get too into the weeds of all of this. I want to keep this video a bit short, sweet, and to the point, which is kind of hard when you're me and you cannot stop talking. But what movements do you find? And I've done a really good job over these last 8 months of finding the exercises that suit me, refining them and progressing them. I am very much a fan of the basics. I don't think you need to do anything super fancy. Like, a lot of my programming is hinges, thrusts, split squats, leg presses, hack squats. It's nothing super fancy. I do a lot of kickbacks, but I just do them well with very high quality execution, and I do them consistently and I progress them. And the final thing you need to take into consideration when you look at your training program is your recovery. And like I said, your recoverability is going to change over the course of the year. So you will be able to recover from higher amounts of volume at certain points of the year, lower amounts of volume at different points of the year. And this just comes down to you understanding your own body and your own needs. And that is something that comes along with time. So, there was a point in my off season where we had to bring my volume down because I just wasn't recovering. My knees were super sore. I couldn't progress my lifts as well. We brought the volume down and suddenly now I could progress those lifts again and I could start making more progress. And this is where more is not always better, right? Yes, you will grow from more volume to a point, but if you get past the point of it being productive, you will get into this place of diminishing returns where you will start running into injuries and niggles and poor recovery. And you have to remember, the number one thing for longevity in bodybuilding is like just being able to train consistently. If you start getting injured, like, you are going to really fuck yourself. So you always want to be protecting from that and protecting your recovery capacity. So what does my split look like? Like I said, I do hamstrings and glutes, upper, quads, rest, glutes and quads, hamstrings and glutes, rest. So it's lots of legs. I train legs 4 days a week. And you know what? I would train legs 5 days a week if I could get away with it, because I love training legs. But we split the volume, like I said, we split the kind of quads and hamstrings and glutes kind of over the week so that I can recover a little bit better from each of them. So my first session is hamstrings and glutes. So that session is 2 sets of lying leg curl, 2 sets of a Smith machine RDL, 2 sets of the booty builder, 2 sets of cable kickbacks, 2 sets of standing hamstring curl, and 2 sets of the abductor machine. So it's a lot of glutes, good bit of hamstrings as well. And that's a session that I did have to reduce the volume a little bit. I had to take out a set of the lying leg curls, take out a set of the booty builder, take out a set of the kickbacks, because I just wasn't recovering from it well enough. But we're hitting the glutes and hamstrings with quite a good bit of volume there. And like all those sets, I am taking them pretty damn close to failure. The next day we have my upper day. So my upper day now, okay, I'm gonna level with you guys. My upper day is pretty fucking pathetic because, like I said, I don't need to grow my upper body. So when I go in and train upper, I do the exact same weight every week. I stay about 3 to 4 reps shy of failure, and it's very pathetic. So basically the way I do it is I do 2 sets of single arm lat pull downs. I do 2 sets of pullovers. So that's 4 total sets for the lats. That's all I do. I do 3 sets of a line cuffed lateral raise. I do 3 sets of a reverse pec deck, and then 2 sets of a standing cable lateral raise. That's it. That's the whole workout. I don't do any direct arms. I used to have upper back work. I don't do that because, like I said, I don't need anything that's going to hit my traps. So they're pathetic. It's really all about movement quality and just making sure I'm still using the muscles. But I do not train anything close to failure there because I don't need those muscle groups to grow. I also usually do calves on my upper day. I do calves about 4 times across the week, whether it's after a cardio session or after a leg day or after my upper body day as well. And now that I'm in prep, I'll do some abs then. Next up, we have my quad day. So quads is 2 sets of adductors, 2 sets of leg extensions, 2 sets of leg press, 2 sets of Smith machine Bulgarian split squats. So there's a little bit of glutes in there. That's it. That's that whole session. I used to have a pendulum squat in there, but my knees, I couldn't do it. So we had to take the pendulum out, which I do miss it. And I'm hoping that post prep, I'll be able to put it back in if we kind of change some things around. But it sounds easy on paper, but that session is tough. It is tough. Okay. Next, we have glutes and quads. So glutes and quads is 3 sets of lat raises to start, 2 sets of leg extensions, 2 sets of hack squats, 2 sets on the booty builder, 3 sets of kickbacks, and that's it. And calves usually. And then my final session of the week is more hamstrings and more glutes. So I have a seated hamstring curl, Smith machine reverse lunges, 2 sets of each, 2 sets of a B stance RDL, 2 sets of the abductor, cable or machine kickbacks, 3 sets. And that's it. I forgot to say on that glutes and quads day, I actually also do the adductor as well. So again, like lots of legs. That's what those sessions look like. Again, please don't go and copy these. Don't go and copy these because I have worked my way up here, and as you can see, there's more hamstrings and glutes. There's still a good bit of quads, some delts, not really much upper. This is for me, and I've worked my way. And again, please remember always, like, I'm an assisted athlete. I don't think a natural athlete could recover from this. Maybe if you have like super high testosterone naturally or whatever, but it would be pretty hard. And again, your recovery is going to depend on the phase you're in. It's going to depend on your stress levels. It's going to depend on your genetics, your training age, everything. So if we look at the volume there and how that's all split up, I have about 8 sets of delts, 13 sets of quads, 10 sets of hamstrings, 22 sets of glutes. Now, obviously, there's going to be crossover between the glutes and hamstrings volume there. I have 4 sets of lats and I have 6 sets of rear delts. Oh, so I also do rear delts. Is it on my glutes and quads day? Yeah, I forgot to say that. I do 3 sets of rear delts there, the reverse pec deck. So as you can see, a lot of glute volume, good bit of hamstring volume, 13 sets of quads. Like, I find my hamstrings, I can't recover from loads, so that's why I only do 10, but I get really good stimulus from them, and then really minimal on the upper body. So we're splitting that glute volume over about we'll say 3 days. Technically it's 4 because I do those Smith machine Bulgarian split squats, but really it is kind of 3 days. So in terms of my recovery and how that has all gone, like I said, my volume started off higher than this, and I actually had more exercises in there. And over time, we had to bring some of them out, like removing the pendulum, removing some sets of leg extensions, removing some sets of hamstring curls, because I just couldn't recover from them. And ultimately, if you're not recovering and not progressing, like I said, you're not making progress. The number one driver of progress is progressing the amount of stimulus and tension you're getting to the muscle. So if you're going into the gym and you can't, expose your body to that stimulus because you're injured, you're not going to be achieving a whole lot, right? So you need to always monitor this and make sure that you're not training beyond your recovery capacity. Obviously, this, it's going to be dictated by you actually training hard enough, right? Like, you have to actually train close to failure in order to be fatigued, but you do need to be careful of it. So, if you can't recover, you're not going to be growing. Like, that is so key and so important here. And so, even if you want massive legs, that doesn't mean you should be training them 4 days a week, because you might not be able to recover from it. Like, I have loads of wellness girls on my team. They train like 3 days a week. That's plenty, right? Obviously, this has worked really well for me, but I've also been training 10 years. And, I really go in hard on training, and I'm very dialed in with managing my recovery, with ensuring that I'm not doing too much or doing too little. I spend a lot of time looking at exercise selection, and, I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with this, right? And like I said, you have to train with enough intensity. Like, if you're training 5 reps drive failure, you probably can do a lot more volume, but I train pretty damn close to failure. Like most of my sets are within at least 1 to 2 reps shy of failure. Now, I don't just train like an asshole and like push myself way too hard. I would say in the last year, because I train like so much now, I actually am a bit more careful. So those really hard grinder 50-50 reps, I often won't take them, because to me, those reps are the ones that are most likely to drive injury. And it's just not worth that for me, right? I need to not get injured. If I want to keep training legs 4 days a week for the next few years to keep growing at the rate I've been growing, I can't get injured. So this is where I think just being a bit mature within your approach in training, it kind of comes about, right? I spent a lot of years hardcore, beat the logbook, progress at every single opportunity I can. And I think I learned a lot from that. And I think I learned how to train hard from that. But then I took my ability to train hard and I refined it. And that's where I think this kind of meets in the middle, and where I've gotten these results that I've been getting now, and like seeing the growth that I've seen. But yeah, I think like that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about, to be honest. It probably won't be like the longest video ever, but I thought it might be interesting to see how my training is actually laid out as a wellness athlete, what I actually do. Because obviously you guys see my sessions, in different videos, but you never get to see how all of that impacts one another. And like obviously when you're writing a training program, you have to understand how certain sessions will affect the next, right? So like, for example, my first session, I have the RDL, then I have an upper day the following day to let my lower back rest, and then I go and do legs again the next day. Then I have a rest day, then the day after that is when I do my hack squat. I know with something like a hack squat, I need my lower back to be recovered, and then I have the ability to go in the next day and do that hamstrings and glute session, which is a little bit less intense. I mean, it's still like I still feel fucked after it every single time, but it doesn't have like massive huge compound movements. That's why I can do 2 leg days back to back, right? If I was doing 2 full leg days with like big heavy compound lifts, there's no way I could do them back to back. But because a lot of my volume, as you'll see there, is more on isolation exercises, I can get away with it, right? I still have the heavy compounds and still training really hard, but I have distributed it all in a way that it's not impacting one another, and I can still go in and do those back to back leg days or those 4 leg days a week. So I hope that's been interesting. I hope it's giving you guys a bit of an insight into why I do why I do what I do and why I do it, and just giving you some inspiration, maybe, right? Again, please don't copy my program. Don't copy it. You won't be able, I doubt you will be able to do it. But this is just what I do. So if you enjoyed this video, again, don't forget to subscribe, give me a like, give me a comment. And if you're interested in coaching, that is obviously what I do. I ain't making money on YouTube yet. I don't think I ever will. But if you are interested in coaching and working with me, spaces will always be linked down below, and we can have a chat.